Okay, this is exercise 101, locating files. So this is a really quick exploration into the various file types and the user interface that we have with UCAL4 to work with those file types. When you first open up UCAL, you will see that the project manager and the menu bar are very simple. But as you start opening up different files, these interfaces change. This is the initial UCAL4 screen. You can see up the top, the menu bar has just got a couple of options in there. The options are listed here: file transfer, and then some Windows, tiling options, language, things like that, a help function. By the way, I should have noted this earlier, but the help that was done, and I didn't do this, I can't take credit for it, but I think it's done very comprehensively and very well. So I would encourage everybody to access the help when you have questions. So you've got the help, and those are pretty much the only functions that are available initially. But as soon as you open up a file, you can see that the top menu changes. And the new options reflect the file type that you opened and provide access to additional functionality. To open files in the project manager, you can do it a couple of different ways. You can just double click on the file name, or you can right mouse click or context menu and select open file, and the file will open. Just as a heads up, you can open multiple files at the same time in project manager. This is useful sometimes, but it can get confusing. So just a little warning. If you've got files that are outside of the directory structure and not in project manager, you can click on the file on the menu. It opens up a standard Windows I/O input-output box that looks like this. You can navigate using the, I think we all know how to do this, using your standard Windows functions. You can even get to network drives. There is a file filter or an extension filter here, so you can narrow it down by the file type that you're looking for. This is important for UCAL. I think you'll pick it up very quickly, but we've got a couple of file types, and the extensions on the file describe exactly what the function and what is included in the file type. The first and probably most important is the SDF file. This is multi-samples. There can be many samples in this file, and the file contains spectra, things like sample names, date, time, comments, lab values or reference values, and all of the absorbance information per wavelength that was collected when the sample was scanned on the instrument. We also have PRD files. These are equation files. They are multi-constituent. So this contains all of the information needed to predict constituent values from an SDF file or from an instrument. For those of you that are familiar with ISI or FOSS format, the PRD file is equivalent to an EQA, PCA, and library file all in one file. We also have AVF files. These are predicted files. So they contain sample names and the predicted values from your NIR. The AVF is created from an SDF, a spectral file, and a PRD, or an equation file. We also have an STF file. This is a transfer file. This is kind of an older technology. We don't use it very much with the XT because TAS aligns our instruments very, very closely. But this is a transfer file that can help make one instrument more like or more similar to another one. We use other file extensions, CSV text. These are text-based formats. I think most people are familiar with these. There is also an LVF file format. It's lab values. We really don't use this anymore. There are some non-UCAL files that we use also. An SPC is a single spectrum, a single sample file, originally from Graham's TLSIQ software. These individual files can be combined into a multi-sample file called a JDX file. Similar content, just multi-samples. We can also use ISI or FOSS file formats of CAL and NIR. And these above formats are generally formats that can be used in our file conversion function. So we can bring data from these other file formats into UCal4 and then work on it with our software. This is one of the beginning exercises, just opening up an SVF file. As soon as you do that, you'll be able to see the sample. You can see that there's a column for delete. There's also a highlighting. We'll talk about that in a second, but please distinguish between those. You've also got kind of a work area over here that shows what you're looking at. There's a tab in there. It's got a column of checkboxes. Please note that if there's a checkbox in this column, it means that it is in use or active. So this one here, all of these samples right now are showing that they're in use and active. If that column is unchecked, almost all functions in UCal4 will ignore that sample. So that sample is still present in the file, but it will not be used. It will not be used in regressions. It will not be used in plots, for example. Also shows the position number that can be useful. So we'll see sample name, and then over on the right side, I call it the work area, the information about what you're working on. As you open this up, you will notice that the menu bar changes and there are more options up there. One of them is select, and you can select in these various manners. Position number, sample name by sample. You can select all the deleted samples or the ones that are unchecked. Every ith sample. This looks like a lot of options. I think I know I've used every one of them. So this is, you're going to find that as you're working with UCal4 and as you're creating your calibrations, you're going to do a lot of sample manipulation. And it's very useful to be able to select every 7th sample, for example, to create an independent validation set. Or to select a group of samples, write it to a different file, and then select the remaining samples in the file and write it to a different file. So all of these are very useful when you're working with samples. The add delete column is the toggle. At the top of the column, when you click on there, all of the checkboxes will reverse their state. So if they're checked, they become unchecked and vice versa. Please note that when they're unchecked, it means that the sample will be ignored. Okay? It does not mean that they're selected. So in the software, it says write selected samples. That does not mean write checked. It means write the highlighted samples in the samples area. And we'll see that in just a second. The reference value tab has information about your lab values or reference values. It's a place that you're going to be doing some work as well. These items here that have an asterisk can be edited. You'll see that. That's part of your exercise. The graphics tab, this is very useful. So useful, we've got an entire exercise coming up that we will work through all of the different graphic options. But it's really visualizing what you've got in your SVF file. So here's an example, a bunch of samples that are listed here, and you can see that you've got some plotting options that are available. There are different options that you might want to do. You can plot one sample. You can keep stepping through and plotting more and more samples. You can plot them all at once. You can add samples from other files. A really interesting part is putting various math treatments on it. And as we get into the regression part of the course, we're going to see that the math treatment allows us to ignore some of the variability in the spectra that does not help us, and emphasizing or retaining the variability in the spectra that do help us get where we want to go, which is predicting our constituents well. The plot tab allows you to visualize what happens when you do these math treatments. You can also work on groups of samples. You can average samples with the same sample numbers. You can do deviations, things like that. And this is also where we do the 3D scores plot that we saw in lesson 3. There is information about the file available from the menu bar, and there is a header. The header looks like this. It's got information about the instrument that collected your spectral data. You can edit serial numbers in here. This is done with Control E. If you have more than one instrument in your company's network, you will probably have to do this. If you've got one instrument, you're creating spectral files, you're doing calibrations, you're creating a PRD, everything is going to be fine with just one sample number in there. If you want to make a more general use calibration, we generally take out the serial number and we make these fields blank, and that allows for more universal use. So you will want to do that, do a Control E, remove those, and then press save, and your file header will be updated. You can also view histograms. Histograms show the distribution of your reference values in your calibration. This is very useful. This is an okay, not a great distribution. You can see that the lower values of this constituent of interest, it looks like moisture, the lower values are very poorly represented, and it's pretty skewed towards the mean. And the histogram allows you to visualize what's going on with your reference data. You can also view a PRD. If you recall, that's a calibration or an equation file. And when you open up a PRD, it looks like this. You can see that you've got now a product file that's opened. You've got various columns for the constituents and all of the information, the regression type, samples included, all sorts of calibration statistics included in your PRD file. And a final file format is your AVF file. This is a predicted file. This is only generated in UCal, not from an instrument. This is when you're doing an offline prediction. So you're making predictions in UCal from an SVF file and a PRD. The nice thing about an AVF file is it's a very convenient place to copy your data and drop it into Excel or another spreadsheet if you want to do additional manipulations. AVF file looks like this. You can select your data, copy it to a clipboard, and paste it into an Excel file. Okay, so that's the end of the lecture here. The accompanying exercise is exercise 101, and in the Academy you will see the list of the various steps that we want you to go through on exercise 101. Please proceed and do this. The hands-on part of this course is where you will really cement all of the content that we've been presenting to you. So we will jump over here. I'm going to give a quick demonstration of some of the topics that we were talking about. You can see that I've opened up UCal 4. I'm going to jump into the lesson number 1, the spectral files. Exercise 101 is here, and you can see that there are 4 files that are there. If you recall, we can open up files with a double click. We can also right mouse click to open up the file. I opened an SVF file. Please explore this interface and follow the exercise. You can see that the menu changed when I opened up the SVF file, and all of the different options, for example, are available here. Okay. The same thing with an PRD file. This one I will double click to open. Again, you can open it up various different ways. You can see all of the information that's available here. And there are options up here in our PRD or our product file, okay? So please proceed to exercise 1, complete that exercise, and we will move on to exercise 102. Thanks, everyone.